Okay, welcome to this month's Look-See. We're in the middle of July 2023 already, and this is a bit of a look at what's happening in our world, along with some commentary on what's happening, where we're going as a group of people that are trying to create and manage a reality system that works, a little bit according to our liking. So let's look at what we're doing, how it's going, and where things are headed as a result of our efforts. So, number one, hospitals struggle mightily to stay open, but they begin cutting their services to the bone. People are doing a lot of self-care and self-repair. Online sites that offer ideas and techniques for various healing conditions or for healing various conditions are flourishing. So take care of yourself. Number two, gasoline prices looked really high by the fall. People were thinking twice before they drove any great distance. And there was also a return of delays in getting new parts for equipment and new technology, like phones and computers. So get what you need now. Number three, I saw the Red Cross actually trying to help a situation where flooding had occurred and a lot of the food supply and water supply was ruined. Now, I've not had a very good opinion of the Red Cross for some time, but when I saw this, I had to give them credit for their help in the situation. So thank you, Red Cross. Number four, groups of people all over the US are talking. They are sort of feeling each other out to see what can be done about our situation. And that's a good thing, in my view. I just had a friend stop here overnight a couple nights ago, and on his way from the West Coast to back to the East Coast, he said he noted people are wonderful everywhere. What's wrong with our poor government? That was his comment. So, yeah, you guys, you're wonderful. Don't take what's going on in the government to be a reflection of you. Okay. Number five, let's have a little reminder from last month that this is our reality. We create our reality, even though most people have no idea how that happens. What we have here on planet Earth at this level is a reality based on personal freedom. We have free will. A free will reality is a diverse and somewhat messy collection of beliefs, ideas, perceptions, thoughts, words, actions, reactions, personal dreams, cultural habits, goals, activities, and so on. People come to a free will reality because they believe they are ready to test their ability to create wisely and well. There are other forms of reality out there that are not based on personal freedom and in which everyone thinks the same and works toward the same goals. In both kinds of systems, though, survival of the group is the goal. But in a free will system, the survival is much more tenuous and uncertain. Those who enter a free will system are attempting to learn to create a world that allows each to survive and hopefully thrive. And the ultimate goal for each of us is to become eternal, an eternal being, to eventually join the Godhead. But before you can even think about that, you have to learn to survive. So you create a personal life, and then you reflect on what you have created and how well it matches your goal, how well it works, what would make it better, what would you change? When it comes to reality systems, a nice analogy here is a comparison between a forest and a formal garden. If you walk through a forest, You see old trees, young trees, downed trees, dead trees. There are leaves and twigs all over the floor, all sorts of grasses, mosses, wildflowers, a wide range of medicinal plants, ferns, mushrooms, and other living things. There are saplings trying to come up, vines that can trip you up, wild blackberry and other brambles, open areas, areas that you just cannot get through because of too much overgrowth. Sunny places, there are shadowy places, uneven ground with standing water here and there, and occasionally big rocks scattered around. It often smells damp and a bit like compost. Other times it's fresh and fragrant. All in all, it's a very messy place. And yet it continues to renew and regenerate itself over and over all by itself. Now, if you walk through a formal garden, everything is tightly controlled. The few trees are much, much smaller. They're carefully placed, regularly trimmed, and heavily shaped. There are clearly defined beds with definite boundaries, a limited array of specifically chosen flowers and herbs. Again, all carefully placed. To make up for the lack of diversity that is the signature of Mother Nature, there's a pleasing array of colors and planting arrangements that keep the tallest plants to the background and forbid anything invasive like peppermint, Virginia creeper, or sumac. There are fragrant herbs, a few interesting statues, perhaps a small pond or water feature. And the entire garden is laced with stone or brick pathways, defining where you can walk. It is beautiful, but unnatural. It is inviting, but confining. It is open to constant inspection or surveillance, and there is immediate removal of anything that is not welcome. The moment the caretaker stops tending to every detail, invasion by Mother Nature occurs and chaos follows. The formal garden returns to a more natural state. These two systems, forest and formal garden, pretty much show us the two paths we are facing. What are we to learn? Well, we're learning to find the balance between chaos and control. And that's where we are at the moment, teetering on the edge of confinement and trying to move beyond a system that wishes to impose tight control. Since we only recently began to discover how controlled we already were, there will be some chaos as we return to a more natural state where ongoing renewal and regeneration bring the kind of steady change that makes us resilient and able to make choices and changes with clarity and wisdom as we go along. So hang in there. Number 6. Next on my list is climate change. When I was growing up and all through my adult years, I noticed the patterns of the weather that occurred with great regularity. My family lived on several acres of land, and we grew almost all of our own food. So we were outside and dealing with the weather a lot. The weather pattern in the thumb of Michigan was pretty dependable. There was some variation from year to year, but the patterns were consistent. The last snow came in March, and then gradually it started to warm up over April and May. It was perfect for working and playing outside. Not too hot, not too cold, not too humid, and hardly any bugs or mosquitoes yet. By the end of May, we started planting because the night temperatures were no longer dropping below freezing. By mid-June, it was very warm. And by the last week of June, it was always blistering hot in the 90s. We dreaded that last week of June because we had no air conditioning. Relief always came with thunderstorms and lightning around the first week of July. The rest of July and the first part of August was always perfect summer weather. Warm and sunny every day, maybe a thunderstorm here and there, but by mid-August, it would begin to turn rainy, breezy, and just a little bit cooler. We could tell the sun was already moving south. The first week of September was variable. Sometimes it was rainy, sometimes not. But by the second week, when we returned to school, the temperatures were often hitting 90 degrees again. Stuck in a stuffy classroom, we suffered because, again, there was no air conditioning. By the end of September, the sun had moved far enough south that the nights were much cooler, but the days remained sunny. This persisted until the second week of October, when we would have lots of rain and the first hints of frost. We called it the winter monsoon. October would continue to cool down, and by mid-November, there were hard frosts and the first snowflakes. The second week of December, we would see our first big snows, and from then until the following March, we would have snow on the ground almost continuously. And then the pattern started over as the sun began traveling northward once more. Mother Nature is full of patterns that make life somewhat predictable and therefore manageable. Now the pattern is all screwed up. They are calling it climate change, but the nature of the pattern change makes it obvious that someone is messing with the weather. The changes are not natural. There will be a sudden severe heating up of an area, and then a sudden and drastic cool down, followed by another heat up and another cool down. Some years have heavy snow in November, and then it gets warm, and there are warm temperatures and no snow until winter is over, when it suddenly becomes cold and snowy in April and May. This is not natural. And to claim that the planet is heating up doesn't make sense. If it's suddenly snowing in April and May after a warm winter, where's the heat up? This is not climate change. It's a pattern change. Someone is messing with the jet streams and flipping seasons around. If the climate change theory were true, April and May would be warmer than winter, not colder and snowy after an absence of winter. If the planet rolled over and the stars were in a different place, the weather would be drastically different, and we could legitimately say we were dealing with climate change. The fact of the matter is that the sun is still traveling north and south every year. Mother Nature does not hop all over the temperature map, creating long-term, deeply contradictory effects that zigzag back and forth, changing winter and other seasons in an arbitrary way. To claim that global warming is heating up the planet and then change that to climate change because you need a term that better covers up those with equipment that can heat up massive stretches of ocean or landscape. Those who can kill thousands of cows by cooking them right on the hoof. People who play with electronic equipment and bounce sizzling frequencies around the skies, accidentally frying whole flocks of birds that then fall like rain to the ground. Or people who want to play with weather patterns to see how much disruption they can cause. We have 100-year droughts every other decade. Why? We have 100-year storms and floods every time you turn around. Drought here in Michigan is rare because of the moisture coming off the Great Lakes. But now we're seeing weeks and even months of little to no rain, and then suddenly it rains to the point of flooding. Frost warnings are earlier and earlier, and then winter warms up to the point of no snow. Why? We aren't having climate change. We're having weather wars. The only climate change that's happening is the kind caused by people who want to harm others. Number 7. Let's talk about power, especially the power to create a reality. Power is the ability to decide and do. It is the ability to see what's happening. Power is the ability to name something and then decide what that means, as well as the ability to assess a range of outcomes before spending time, energy, and money to make something happen. The government of the United States is losing power daily. They are like teenagers who fail to think about the consequences of their actions. The US recently pushed Belgium to stop selling a specific kind of equipment to China. The equipment in question was used to make computer chips. What did China do? They retaliated by refusing to sell certain rare earth elements to the US. The elements in question are needed for us to make our own computer chips. So, by insisting that Belgium cut out China, China turns around and cuts out the US. When are we going to wake up and realize that stupidity and failure to anticipate the response is not a mature, workable, long-term strategy, nor is trying to hurt others? Number 8. I have a big extended family. My mother was one of 14 children, in which 13 survived childhood. My father came from a family of 10, in which 9 survived. My mother and father only had 6 children that survived, but my aunt had 12, who all survived. Her youngest, my cousin, grew up to be a chemical engineer working in Cincinnati. He was very bright, very ambitious, and he suffered from bipolar disorder, which used to be called manic depressive disease. One day, he got into the manic end of the disorder and bought an entire city block of buildings. This was an overwhelming amount of money, time, energy, and work for someone who was young, alone, and had no experience in commercial buildings or their management. Soon, he dropped into the depressive end of the spectrum. It was all too much. He was emotionally and mentally paralyzed and physically sick at the thought of what he now had on his hands. He started taking prescription drugs to help him get back in balance again, but they didn't help much, and the side effects were horrendous. I was a budding naturopathic physician, and when my aunt called to ask if there was anything that could be done to help her baby, my cousin, I had just finished an entire section of study on mental health. Enthusiastically, I said, sure, it can be fixed. And then I set about outlining some detox, a diet, some supplements, some exercise, and some reading for him and my aunt. When he got better, I was probably more surprised than anyone. I realized that what we feed ourselves, how well we clean ourselves out, and what goes on in the body was even more important than I had thought. The quality of perception, thinking, feeling, and consciousness in general was entirely dependent on what we ate and how healthy the body's cells were. And that truth has just been backed up by Dr. Christopher Palmer, MD. Palmer is a psychiatrist, and he was treating a 33-year-old man named Tom with schizoaffective disorder. That's a combination of schizophrenia and bipolar. Tom was on various drugs that caused him to gain over 100 pounds. This greatly affected his self-esteem, and he asked Dr. Palmer to help him lose weight. They tried different diets, but none were working. And finally, Palmer suggested a keto diet, which is high in fats, allows moderate protein, and very low in carbohydrates. Not only did Tom begin to lose weight, his paranoia began fading. His hallucinations began to disappear, and he became interested in life again. Palmer began to suggest a keto diet for other clients with issues ranging from epilepsy to diabetes to Alzheimer's, and they began to heal. This sent him on a journey to understand what was happening in the body. What was the root cause of mental illness? And as he says in his book, after much study and research, it came down to the fact that mental disorders are metabolic disorders of the brain. The mitochondria in the brain were not producing enough energy to support perception and thinking. As it turned out, all mental health issues can be explained by mitochondria and metabolism. Too much sugar, too many carbs, interferes with the mitochondrial function in the brain. Here in the US, we have a pandemic of ADHD, depression, dementia, anxiety, bipolar disorder, substance abuse, stubborn obesity, and many other mental health problems. When you put all the categories of mental health together, it comes down to 50% of our population. 50%. Let me say that again. It comes down to 50% of the population struggling with an array of mental health issues. How can we have an intelligent conversation, a reasonable public discourse, or make wise decisions regarding money, relationships, or governance when half of us are dealing with serious dysfunction of the brain? The answer is we can't. And that does not bode well for our future. Although Palmer is not the first one to make a case for a relationship between the mind and nutrition, he is the first one to put together a complete theory that ties together the causes of all mental illnesses and to find a way to heal them. His book is titled Brain Energy, and he calls his theory the theory of brain energy. If you are dealing with someone who struggles with mental issues, I highly recommend you read his book. As humanoid beings, we are designed to be social, gregarious, and supportive of one another. As a population living in today's world, we are in desperate need of clarity, inner strength, and peace of mind. We can't get these or behave according to our natural design without correcting the American diet. Number 9. If hate speech is filling Twitter, which is what some people are saying, it's out of control. It's all hate speech. If it is, let me say that again. If hate speech is filling Twitter, what does that say about us? It says we are becoming our own worst enemy. Why? Because what we talk about is what we create. Ouch. Number 10. China is very quietly moving men and military equipment into Cuba. This puts our biggest competitor, some would say our biggest enemy, right on our doorstep. This is the very thing the US was doing to Russia that caused Russia to start their military operation in Ukraine. The US was saying they were going to bring Ukraine into NATO, which would have allowed us to move men and military equipment right to the Russian borders. And that was the very thing that Putin said repeatedly that he would not tolerate. Now China is doing it to us. I guess what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Number 11. Last week, Ben & Jerry's, owned by Unilever, lost big money after tweeting that America should hand over Mount Rushmore to Native Americans. People were incensed and immediately slapped a woke label on the company. In truth, over the years, Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's has been quite open and very consistent about how he sees the world, and we didn't call it woke back then. Ben wants a better, nicer world. The problem is knowing how to get it. And here's the thing. We can't go back. We can only go forward. Trying to redo or undo something unjust that happened decades or centuries ago does not work. In consciousness, we can only learn from what we see and then create something better, something beautiful, fair, peaceable, honorable, honest, caring, fun, or balanced going forward. People reach naturally for something better. And then what they do is look back and say, wow, what we did back then was, and you can fill in the blank there. It was stupid, ugly, short-sighted, criminal, unfair, shameful, corrupt. What we did back then was awful. But look at what we've learned. How much vengeance will salve your soul? How many reparations will heal angry hearts? How much getting even will erase a past? How much suffering will we create before we learn to step back and say, that's not working? What else could we try? If what we want is to hurt one another, then no, it's working. However, is that something we can feel proud of? If what we want is something that brings laughter, trust, caring, goodwill, sharing, and the evolution of consciousness, then we have to go above and beyond the old attitudes and responses. Someone has to be strong enough and sensible enough to stop the sequence of retaliation. Instead of trying to stand tough and unemotional, we have to let people know that what they're doing or saying hurts. We have to ask, is that what you want? To hurt me? What is it you are really trying to do? What are you trying to say? I'm listening. There must be something we can do besides just trying to hurt one another. It's what we do going forward that matters. It is impractical to say that we should return the US to the Native Americans because that just creates more of the same disenfranchisement and uproar that the Native Americans experienced. Maybe the Native Americans would rather have freedom or respect for themselves and their ways or respect for Mother Nature. Maybe they would prefer that we keep our word and honor our agreements and treaties. Maybe they want something we never thought of. And we won't know unless we ask in good faith. And then we can move forward in good faith. To do anything else is just more destructive getting even. It's a waste of time. Number 12. We are about to see what happens when the money changes. It looks like the BRICS countries are planning to announce a new gold-backed currency in August. We think we know what that means, but I don't think we have a clue how massively this will impact us. A lot of people have asked, how do I get ready? The answer is be ready for everything. Number 13. I watched a video in which someone was saying that the reason so many countries were choosing China over the US was because China was busy building roads and hospitals and ports, and the US was busy causing wars and laundering money out of target countries. Let that be a lesson for us. Number 14. I saw a very big problem in the middle of the country. I at first thought it was a storm, but I'm not sure that it was a storm. But it took out a portion of the electric grid in that area. It was out for a number of days. I thought almost a week. And a lot of people were very uncomfortable in the heat. Heads up there. Number 15. I'm going to say something obvious, something that we all know, something that I think everybody's wishing for. There will be a change in our government. The source of the change looked like it was focused on Biden and his family. It looked like he survived impeachment, but something else occurs that brings about a change. Maybe it's the Hunter Biden thing. I don't know, but Biden is no longer there. Number 16. Insurance companies are having a very bad time by October, November, and beyond. Some are limiting what they will pay out on certain things. Some are just refusing to pay out, and some cannot pay. And people are beginning to realize that insurance doesn't really insure anything, and they stop paying. Makes it all the more difficult for insurance companies. Number 17. Around the world, the whole world, everybody, people everywhere are so tired of the chaos. It looks like the French government has little or no control over France, and France does not recover that control. Now the Prime Minister of the Netherlands has suddenly retired. His name is Rutte, I think. In the past, I have seen Zelensky disappear from Ukraine, and although he is still there, once again, I could not find him by the end of this year. So he was either in hiding or had been taken out. Or there's a subtle game of moving players around on the world stage, like with Jacinda Ardern retiring from politics in New Zealand, only to move over to the World Economic Forum. So maybe we should be asking, well, where will Macron and Rutte pop up next? Number 18. If you are an artist and you haven't seen the Neo Lucida technology for artists and creatives, you are missing a very important and fascinating drawing aid. This is old technology from the Middle Ages being reborn in our time. I love art. I have a minor in art and design, and in college, I took drawing and discovered how difficult it was to coordinate eye and hand and to be able to draw something that even resembled what it really looked like. So there's tools out there. Learn to use the technological tools. All of you who are artists and designers, stay with your time. Learn the tools. Number 19, and this is our last one, cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are bouncing up and down, and there doesn't seem to be a steady trend anywhere except Bitcoin. If there's a trend at all, most are trending down. There is a critical period in the second half of this year that makes or breaks crypto as a viable currency for the population. That decision looks like it rests on a couple of things. One, how easy or difficult it is to buy what you need. In other words, something to do with the supply chain. And two, how the Ukraine war ends. So I've mentioned this before, but for quite some time, I have seen that there's a period of time where anything and everything serves as money. There are old dollars, new dollars, uh, junk silver, real silver, gold, a host of ordinary goods like gasoline, diesel, kerosene, alcohol, cigarettes, tobacco, food, coffee, tools, and all kinds of parts, all in circulation, and cryptocurrency. When we finally get to the end of the current financial system, if there are not enough goods to purchase, and the Ukraine war ends with the Russians in control of much of Ukraine, cryptocurrencies suffer a big setback. And it looked like the reason was because people stopped believing in everything. There was a huge, I'm not sure, like a depressed period. So, um, so just be aware of that. Second scenario was if we're getting by because there are just enough necessities to fill basic needs, and the Russians come to a negotiated settlement, cryptocurrencies do well and begin to be adopted widely. Third scenario is if the Russians lose and are forced out of Ukraine. It looked like the central bank digital currencies were implemented in many countries, and what I'll call ordinary cryptos struggle. So I did see something that I thought was unusual. It appears that when the BRICS group announces their gold-backed currency, which also includes a digital currency component, everyone expects the US to go down in flames. However, I kept seeing like this secret plan in the works that hopes to surprise everyone with a gold-backed dollar of our own, but only after the financial system has fallen and most of the debt has been cleared away or written off. It looked like we, the people, just have to make it through that period of chaos that occurs when the financial system comes apart. This also looks like it's partially dependent on what happens with Ukraine and Russia. So the US has already started secret negotiations with Russia to end the war, even though they're denying that. So let's hope that that goes smoothly. And that's it for this look-see. For those who are watching or listening for the first time, the look-see is a brief look at what's happening in our world and where the big trends are headed. Reality is not fixed. It is very dynamic and it changes according to what we are doing with our consciousness. Nothing becomes real until we make it real. We make a choice. We take some kind of action. We put something together or take it apart. Those decisive actions are what determine the path and the outcome for all of us. And of course, once we set something in motion, it takes a lot to make a change or get things going in another direction. And that's exactly the reason for looking ahead. If we don't like the direction we see things are going, we can make appropriate changes in a timely way or prepare for what looks inevitable. If we see something we like, we can put some conscious attention on that outcome and help things along. In a physical reality system, you have a lot of energetic structures working together and tightly bonded to one another. Things don't change instantly unless you change the energetic relationships, and we don't do that very well yet. We're still at the stage of trying to change the material objects and their relationships, which is why bombs and guns are the most common tools for changing relationships. So before I get too far off track, I'll just say it's important to look ahead and assess what is happening and where we are going so we know whether or not we need to do something different. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, this is our world. We are creating it one day at a time. Let's create wisely and well. Have a great month. Make a great month.